Be like the cliff against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it. Marcus Aurelius, Roman Emperor. All right. Welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, then I want to especially thank you for tuning in with me so early. All right. So we're going to talk about the Iowa caucus and the LP candidates. Probably going to be a little bit shorter show. I don't really have large amount of thoughts, but I got a few. So let's see what we've got. So let's take a look and let's look at the results from the Iowa caucus first. We'll just kind of dive right in on that. Get a couple things popped up on the screen here. All right, there we go. And let's share this. I got this from, it looks like what, NBC News. But I think the results are going to be basically the same for everybody. There we are. All right. So what are we looking at here? And I apologize. One of the things that I get annoyed about with websites is they have this banner on the top, and then when you kind of like scroll, like the banner like does this really funky thing, or just kind of stays in the way, or sometimes it drops down. It's so annoying. Like as a web developer, I find this irritating that other web developers would use it real estate in such a way. I want to see stuff. I don't want to see your banner and your headers. Anyway, aside. So let's take a look what we got here. We have the winner, of course, was Donald Trump with 51%. And then you have right behind him, well, not right behind him, but second place, Ron DeSantis with 21%, Nikki Haley at 19%, and then Vivek at just under 8%, 7.7. And then honestly, I'm not even sure. I don't even know who the other names are. I mean, I know who Chris Christie is there, but I'm not really familiar with Ryan Binkley, Asa Hutchinson. I mean, I heard these names. I've seen them a couple times, but I don't really know much about them. So anyway, Donald Trump wins. Are you surprised? I'm not. I'm not particularly surprised. I would have been surprised. I would have been pleasantly surprised for the Republican Party if it were Vivek Ramaswamy. I was not necessarily rooting for him per se, but of the Republican candidates, I thought that he probably was the best of them. There are some positions of his that I thought were a bit bizarre, like his whole, you might remember he started going on and on about like the northern border crisis and all that. And I was like, northern border crisis? Like there's no northern border crisis, man. So that was kind of weird. Um, if Ron DeSantis had won, I would have actually been pretty surprised. And actually, I was kind of surprised that he did better than Nikki Haley. Now it's kind of weird because Nikki Haley, like if you look online, which by the way, online is a very poor measure of what's going on and what's going to happen. Like when I was watching online, I was just seeing an entirely different ball game than what we see play out here. So don't watch online. Like it's good to like see what's going on, but don't get your takeaways necessarily from online, at least for how polls and how the voting is going to turn out. Like I think online is a very poor perspective. And but I was actually kind of surprised that Nikki Haley was lower than Ron DeSantis because every time I saw a clip of Ron DeSantis, he was just saying something weird or just like there didn't seem to be any excitement, right? And I'm talking about the videos of him. I'm not talking about like people talking about him. I'm talking about the videos of him. I was like, that doesn't really. It didn't really seem to be inspiring whatsoever. It was kind of boring. And I just like I've never felt like Ron DeSantis was doing anything important on the national stage. Now he seems to have a good following at the state level. and and that's fine. So maybe it's just the case that Ron DeSantis is a governor, and that's the highest position that he's going to get, unless he tags along somebody else. But as far as getting elected by Americans, I think that his ceiling is governor, and that's not like I'm dissatisfied with him as a governor, being somebody that lives here in Florida. However, that is not me saying that as somebody who is dissatisfied with him as a governor. That's just me saying I think that as a candidate, his ceiling is the governor. He's just not he's not suited for the national scene. I'm just not getting that vibe from him. So Nikki Haley, I thought she probably, honestly, I mean, this will be mean to say, but like it is what it is. I think if she were a man, she wouldn't have gotten nearly as much as she got. I think there are a lot of people that are following her and supporting her, like whoever they are, um, who want to see a woman in the White House. That's my feel of the situation. I know it'll make some people angry. Um, I'm not saying that's the way it should be. I'm just describing what I think is. I think that's really the driving factor for a lot of people is that they look at Nikki Haley and they see a woman and they want something different, and that's something different for them. But otherwise, I don't really see a whole lot that's inspiring out of her. In fact, if she were a man with the same exact campaign, it was Fred Haley. I think that she would have scored even lower than she did below Ron DeSantis. So she got like 19.1%, and Ron DeSantis got 21%, 21.2%. So I think she would have probably been lower, like in the middle teens, somewhere like 14, 15%, just based on the things that I saw from her. Personally, I think she's an absolute tyrant. And I think, generally speaking, Republicans are tyrants. So there's that. But I think that Nikki Haley is specifically a tyrant that is, um, she's kind of putting it out on the table for you to see. You might remember when she was asked about online anonymity, and she was like, "Look, everybody online needs to have their name and their face, attached to it." And I get the appeal to that, but also I think that there is a large value if we value freedom of speech, we have to. It's kind of like it's embedded into it that we must value anonymity, even if people use it poorly, and they do. People use anonymity to get on there and just be mean spirited and say things and stir trouble and all that good stuff. But there's always two sides to every coin, right? So for me, I look at it and say the value of anonymity is absolutely worth it to deal with the nonsense that comes along with it, right? Nothing good that's of value is of value without some sort of other side to it, right? There's always a trade-off. So, and then there was other things where, she's totally a war hawk. So like in my opinion, total tyrant, probably the worst of the bunch, mostly because she told us who she was. Everybody else, it's not always clear exactly who they are. Now, Donald Trump, he, of course, won. I'm not terribly surprised. I wasn't really making any predictions. In fact, let me tell you what I said as far as my prediction. I made it kind of last minute, kind of as tongue in cheek. I wasn't really trying to be super duper serious here, but I said Iowa prediction. Some people will be upset. Some people will be happy. Some people will be surprised. The Republican Party will still be terrible for freedom. And as it turns out, I nailed it. There are some people that are upset, and there are some people who are happy, and there are definitely some people who are surprised. And the Republican Party is no better for freedom, same as it was. So like that's what it is. Like that's how I see it. All right. Anyway, so back to the caucus results. So I think this is interesting. Again, not very surprising. Now, I will tell you this with Vivek, I was a little bit surprised. Um, because I wasn't sure if he was going to win. One of the things that I saw that I really did like, he went to like some crazy number of campaign events in Iowa, despite the cold weather and the storms, and other people had canceled theirs. And I don't remember the exact number, but it was like a huge number of campaign events. He didn't cancel a single one, and I think he went to like every location like twice or something like that. So kudos to him for putting in the work. I this is what I think a candidate should do, and I actually did like him as a candidate in many ways because one of my favorite things about him, and I was telling my wife this just yesterday. I said, I told her because she's not a libertarian. I said, I think you probably of the Republicans, you probably would have liked Vivek the most. I said because he comes off as very charming, very cordial, respectful, and one of the things that he does or was doing is when he would get a heckler, he would frequently invite them up or frequently leave the stage to go and talk with them. And so I think this is a very valuable thing. This is something that probably Americans don't value enough. And when I saw those kind of things, I thought that it might I thought that would go toward him getting more votes. Like people would like that. They would see that he was somebody that's different, that not only could bring somebody up on stage, but could handle them, right? So he could handle people. But apparently that's not what they were looking for. So, and that's not the only reason. I mean, I just thought that he had a good way of talking to people. He was very smart or is very smart. He's very articulate, but he's not so articulate that he feels like you're talking to somebody who's speaking in lofty terms, right? You don't feel like you're talking to this like super educated guy that you're like, man, he's talking above my head. No, he still comes across as approachable and talkable. I don't even know if that's a word or not, but talkable to the regular everyday average Joe. Like you don't have to be a college graduate or a professor to speak with him. You could be a regular everyday working man or woman and go up and talk to him. You could express your concerns to him and say, "Look, I have this concern," and he would take it seriously. That was the other thing that I found really interesting about him. Like, I know a lot of people ran him over the coals because it sounded like he was supporting what was that? It's the theory where like white people are gonna be like bred out or something like that. The replacement theory, the great replacement. And people were like, "Oh, he's supporting the great replacement theory." But if you actually watch the videos where he was talking about it, what he said was, we should have that conversation. He didn't say like, I necessarily support it in the way that they are. I do believe that he argued that the Democratic Party, that was kind of their position. And what he was talking about is bringing in a whole bunch of immigrants to for them to win over, not necessarily, oh, we're being outnumbered by brown people, because I think my impression of the great replacement theory is that there's like kind of like two sides to that. One side is, hey, this is a political strategy where the Democratic Party is literally trying to bring in immigrants and be nice to them so that they become eventual voters in the future. And then there's the other side, which I think is a bit more negative and ludicrous to say the least. And that's like, hey, immigrants are coming over here and they're having children and families and they're taking all our women and whatever. And eventually there's just not going to be any more white people. Now, maybe I misunderstood the great replacement theory, but that's my impression of it. Is I think there's like two sides. There's a side where it's like really politically driven, and then there's one where you're more worried about how things are playing out culturally. And I think that's absurd, and that shouldn't be a concern whatsoever. But if there is a party that is that's showing evidence that they are doing something in order to change the demographics of the voters, in order for them to win more elections, well, then I think that is a problem. I mean, like you need to be fighting for the American vote as it is and as it becomes, right? However, that like I'm very much I'm not quite an open borders person. I'm more of an Ellis Island kind of guy. So I'm very welcoming to the idea of immigration. I think our immigration system is absolute garbage and we need to loosen it up. And then as we do loosen it up, that means we will have more immigrants coming over here. And I think that is a good thing. And if more immigrants coming over here ends up just naturally through the natural course of things. That ends up in becoming fewer white people. Well, that's the way it is. That's fine. That's okay. That's not a like if it's a natural, organic, cultural change, then that's fine. That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. But if it's a change that's driven by politics in order for a party to win, that is absolutely a negative thing. And I think it was a good thing that Vivek was willing to have the conversation. And so for those reasons, I thought he would have done a little bit better than get 7.7. I mean, I'm kind of surprised that he didn't get into the double digits. That was a bit surprising. On the other hand, since everybody likes to talk about their conspiracy theories that they're getting in on, let me tell you mine. Vivek seemed to play very nicely with Donald Trump. And Donald Trump did his thing, normal thing, talking trash about anyone and everyone. I'm not so like I'm willing to entertain the idea that maybe Vivek and Donald Trump were playing together all along. I mean, he did come out and support Donald Trump right after his loss. In fact, I think I have the video that we can play. So let's let's hear what he had to say, and then we'll talk more about my little conspiracy theory here. So let's switch some screens around here really quickly. Bring this back up over here, and then we're gonna go to this, and let's see here. Give me just a second to make a couple changes here. All right, there we are, and almost ready. I promise. I had it mostly queued up, but not entirely. So let's hear what Vivek had to say. And
Now, this is a campaign founded on speaking the truth, not just when it's easy, but when it's hard. Not just to the Democrats, but to our own side. And not just to other campaigns and candidacies, but to ours. And so I will stick to the truth tonight.
There we go.
The first hard truth, and this one's hard for me. I got to admit this. But we've looked at it every which way, and I think it is true that we did not achieve the surprise that we wanted to deliver tonight. And I think that that's just a hard fact that we're going to have to accept as a campaign. And the question then is, what do we do that is right for our country? And so Purv and I, we actually didn't make this contingency plan before everybody told us to. We said, no, we're not doing that. But we talked about it tonight. We took a little bit of time in our apartment in Des Moines before coming here to make some hard choices. And I wanted to make a couple of announcements tonight to get the business out of the way. And then I want to tell you where we're going. As of this moment, we are going to suspend this presidential campaign. And this is going to have to be, there's no path for me to be the next president absent things that we don't want to see happen in this country.
So I think this is kind of weird. And apologies, folks. I clicked on the wrong screen here, but we will get me right back. And let's do that. There we go. Now I'm on the screen. Perfect. So he's kind of suggesting like, do we need? I feel like there might be this underlying suggestion, like, do we need another January 6th? Something like that. It's kind of it feels kind of weird to me. I can't pinpoint it specifically and say, hey, this is exactly what he's talking about. It seems like a weird comment to make. Like, hey, there's no path for us to win unless we do something that's really, really bad. Right. Like it's just got this weird conspiracy, like we might have to get to that point. Right. So it seems kind of weird to me that he would even make that comment. Now, I'm not surprised that he's necessarily going to give his support to Donald Trump. He did get single digits. And so it does make sense for him to suspend his campaign after this, after seeing these numbers, because I think these numbers are very telling for him. And I didn't really pull the research, but if you look back, you can see where there was some you can kind of make some predictions based on the Iowa caucuses to a degree. And so, but when you're at 7.7%, the likelihood of you getting back up to where you need to be to actually win not only the primary, but then also go on and win the election, like that's a pretty grim number. Like I feel like if he didn't get at least 20% based on the numbers we were seeing, then we should expect anybody that got single digits to say, you know what, it's not worth it. Let's not waste campaign dollars. Let's not waste people's time. Let's just suspend the campaign. So anyway, I think it's kind of weird, but let's continue on. Let's listen to what he has to say.
And I think that I am very worried for our country. I think we are skating on thin ice as a nation. We have done everything in our part to make, and done, every one of us in this room has done our part to save this country. And I am so proud of every one of you who have lifted us up, but we're a campaign founded on the truth. And so that's why we've made that decision today. And I'm also making the decision that this has to be an America First candidate in that White House. As I've said,
See, it just feels to me like everything he's saying is kind of following this path, this vision of how we need to present ourselves to the American people. That Trump is like, man, things are so bad. We gotta do all this. We gotta do that. We gotta, and it's just like, and they all kind of do it. They all kind of spread their own fear mongering, like this is the most important election, in our lifetimes. And if you don't vote for me, the whole world's gonna end, and yada yada yada. They all kind of do that, but I just feel like when you when you add the fact that he quickly when you add two factors. Number one, he didn't say anything negative about Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump said stuff negative about him, but I think that I'll get to that. So he doesn't say anything negative about Donald Trump. He just supports him. He's like, you know what, I would pardon him, all these good things. It's the right thing to do. So he's very supportive of Donald Trump. So I feel like he kind of laid the foundation to support Trump later. And then now he's talking kind of in that same vein of like, hey, this has got to be America first, which is very close to sounding like "Make America Great Again." So I'm getting the vibe, and again, there's no concrete, there's no silver bullet here, or shooting gun, or there's nothing here specifically that says, "Yep, that totally means they were working together." But it just feels like they were actually working together, and um, and that may be why we didn't see Trump go to the debates, because Vivek went to the debates instead, and that put out the feeler to get a feel for how Trump, whether Trump should bail before the primary. Here's the thing: Trump doesn't like to lose. If you've paid attention to him over the years, he doesn't like to lose, and even when he does lose, he spins it so that it looks like he doesn't lose. In his book, what was that real estate book that he? Oh, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the book at the moment. I really need to stop doing a show at 7 in the morning, but I'm not going to. I'm gonna get through it. But anyway, he wrote a book a while ago, The Art of the Deal. That's the name of the book. And so he wrote this book, and I read it years ago. And in there, he's talking about success. Trump, and I know that Trump had a ghostwriter, blah blah, but his book, The Art of the Deal, and he says, look, you need to do one of two things. You need to show people that your success that you've had, your wins, in order to get them to support you, or you've got to give them the impression that you're a winner, right? So he's always had this mentality of, I either can show you my results, or I make you feel like I'm a winner no matter what. And so I feel like there might have been this kind of behind the scenes situation where Trump and Vivek were working together. Vivek went out to the debates, and he was his own person, but he did not disparage Donald Trump. And that would be an opportunity for Donald Trump to gauge what is the feel for him, right? Um, and so he can get like, because think about it. Vivek was basically like several other people were unwilling to call out Trump, but they weren't necessarily willing to be on his good side and say nice things about him, right? Um, they were just like they wouldn't call him out except for what? Chris Christie? Chris Christie would, and he got booed terribly. So it seems to me that this is just some way for Trump to gauge, hey, what are my prospects for winning the primary? What are my prospects for winning the election? And it offers him an easy way out because if Vivek comes along, he's very articulate and he can talk to people, can make them feel, better about having come to his events, those kind of things. If he can get some momentum, then it might tell Donald Trump, hey, let me back out and I'll support Vivek. Right. And so I don't know. That's my conspiracy theory. But let's continue on. Let's not babble on too much about conspiracy theories.
This is the beginning. There are two America First candidates in this race.
See right
And
there.
earlier tonight, I called Donald Trump to tell him that I congratulated him on his victory. And now going forward, he will have my full endorsement for the presidency. And I think we're going to do the right thing for this country. And so I'm going to ask you to follow me in taking our America First movement to the next level. It did not begin in 2016. It began in 1776.
All right. So that's all that we have for that. So again, he's like, there's two America First candidates, and he's presenting himself as one. Donald Trump was the other. So I'm really just getting this vibe that he was working with Trump to identify whether or not Trump was going to win the primary, and this gives Trump an opportunity to get out and make up whatever excuse for getting out that he can early on, so he doesn't have to have a second defeat because he lost to Joe Biden. And why would he want to run again and then lose to Joe Biden a second time? So I feel like he's probably feeling out the situation and remember, before he was elected the first time, for years, it was bounced around. Yeah, maybe I'll run for president. Maybe I'll run for president. Right. And I think those were feelers trying to get a feel. You just say, like, maybe I'll run for president. And then if a bunch of people get behind you, that's a nice start. Right. Like that says, okay, maybe there's something here. Maybe I need to look further. But if everybody's like, yeah, that'd be kind of cool. But anyway, like if they do that, then all of a sudden, guess what? There's really no reason because it's clear that there's not really the support there. So that's my feel of the situation with Iowa and all that. I think that Vivek, I think he was a decent candidate in many ways. There are some ideas of his that I don't like. I think he was very articulate. I think he did a great job of, speaking to normal, everyday voters in a way that makes them feel good about having had that conversation. And I think that he was in some ways some sort of feeler for Donald Trump to see, because as we saw, we pull that back up on the screen here, as we see, um, Donald Trump won 51%, more than twice the two that are behind him, Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley. In fact, if you add up the next two, Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley, it's still not 51%, right? Like even both of those together are like only 40%. And then if you even add Vivek, so like I mean, like he won by a huge amount. We're not talking like, he won at 51%, and then Ron DeSantis won at like 35%, kind of trailing close behind. No, the second person was way far behind, way behind. So that's my feel on it. Now let's talk about some libertarian candidates. Let's see. I got something else to put up on the screen here. Let me put that up. Where did it go here? So let's go to. I figured out how to use my bookmarks finally. So that's a good thing. I was having a little bit of trouble the other day. So let's see what we've got here. All right. And we're going to put this up on the screen. So yeah, let's do this full screen. That'll be the best. Yeah, that works. All right. So this is what we got. We got Chase Oliver, Michael Rechtenwald, Michael Termott, Joshua Smith, Vivek Ramaswamy, Mario Perales, Robert Sanson, Jacob Hornberger, Lars Mapstead, Art Olivier, and then none of the above. So now, not all of these are Libertarian candidates, but our Libertarian candidates are in here. So Chase Oliver at the very top, 40%. Michael Rechtenwald, 17%. Mike Termott, 13%. Joshua Smith, 13%. Technically 14% for both Joshua and Michael. 13.95. We can round up in fairness there and just call it 14%. Then we get down to Jacob Hornberger, 1.16%. Lars Mapstead, 1.16%. So what is my take here? Now, I'm not picking any sides. I have chosen to refrain from, at this time, that may change later, I don't know, making a decision and saying who do I want to support. Ultimately, I support any of the candidates that the delegates in Washington this coming May will elect. I'm going to support the Libertarian candidate. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But first, I think Chase did an absolute amazing job. He has been hustling, and he does very, very well when he's in front of a camera. Very well. There are some, I don't agree with Chase on everything. I think he does. I think he will have to face the issues of like trans issues, and that he took a lot of heat a while back. That seems to have quieted down a little bit from libertarians lately, at least not that I'm seeing anything. But he is out there hustling. All of them are out there hustling. I will say, from what I have been able to see, the top four here have also, well, not the top four have hustled, but so has Lars Mapstead. Now, I haven't seen a lot from Jacob Hornberger. I know he's been at some events, but I just don't see a lot from him so much. Lars Mapstead, I do see a lot, but I feel like his campaign was largely, he's been in person, but it's also he's put a lot of energy into making a social media campaign, and he said as much when I interviewed him. But I'm not so sure how well that ends up resulting in getting votes at the end of the day. I think it plays a role. I think there is a role for it, but I think that you get to a point where all of a sudden the diminishing returns hit hard. And I think maybe that's where he is. Now it's funny because I'll get on Twitter and I'll go around and I'll be in something that has nothing to do with presidential candidates at all, and then I'll see a Lars Mapstead ad. So he's definitely got the ads out there, and I think he was a big component in Maine getting their ballot access this year. So absolutely, kudos to him. Can we get a little clap? I can get a little clap. So so that's a good thing. Absolutely, I think it's amazing when anybody in the party can help a state get their ballot access, one of the states that has trouble. So now of these top four, I think they should probably remain in. I think it's a judgment call for any others because unlike the Republicans and the Democrats, I don't know how well the Iowa caucuses, what that says about our candidates. I don't know. Like these are good numbers. Don't get me wrong, but my understanding is that this is the first year we've been in the Iowa caucuses. Now, that may not be true, but I thought I read that a time or two. I want to think that Gary Johnson was also in the Iowa caucuses because he had a fair amount of momentum in his campaign and was getting some media attention. But nonetheless, I don't think that Iowa caucuses for the Libertarian Party tell us a whole lot. Um, Other than maybe like who did the most hustle in Iowa. And I know that Chase was hustling, and I'm not going to say my opinion of who did the most hustling because I don't really know. I didn't pay close enough attention. Um, but it does look like Chase did, the most hustling there. And so kudos to Chase for that. Michael Rechtenwald right behind him. Now he's a favorite of the Mises caucus. Um, and again, the Mises Caucus, well, I think they're kind of split a little bit, but I think largely they are behind Michael Rechtenwald. So again, you've got the party where you've got this seemingly large support behind a candidate, Michael Rechtenwald, but then he was trailing way behind Chase Oliver. If you doubled his numbers, he still doesn't even touch Chase Oliver's numbers. So So clearly he's far behind. Like, we're looking at kind of a similar situation to what we were looking at with the Republicans in Iowa, where you had Trump at 51%, and then the second runner up didn't even, like, they're not even at half of what the winner has. So here, Chase, is outpacing them by more than twice as much. So I find that kind of interesting. I don't know what that means on the national stage. I don't know what it means in the Libertarian Party. Personally, I'm going to support whichever libertarian candidate the delegates choose, unless there's something dramatic that happens. And I will say this. Let me bring something else up on the screen. This is a comment that I made a while back, and it seems like it has turned out to be wise words on my part. So let's see, where is it here? I'm going to find it, and we will perfectly get it right up here. And so let's see here. There we are. Perfect. All right. DeSantis. And this, I posted this in October of last year. Okay. I said DeSantis, RFK Jr., and Vivek have all come out in support of war in the Israel Hamas conflict. None should be president. Unless I've missed it, no libertarian candidate has come out in support of war, making any of them better than any duopoly candidate. So I said that in October, and guess what? Aged like fine wine, because I was right. I was right, at least in terms of why I am supporting the libertarian candidate. I am supporting the libertarian candidate because all of them oppose war. All of them oppose, um, sending our sons and daughters over to fight. They all oppose sending our dollar bills over there to support fights. We need to remove ourselves from conflicts that do not involve us. And the libertarian candidates have consistently shown that they will do that, right? So this is why I am keeping my support behind the Libertarian Party. Now, I will point this out. I have seen some people get all excited about RFK and Vivek. I don't think there's been much excitement about DeSantis. DeSantis got a little excitement from the libertarians during COVID for being the anti-COVID governor. I mean, he didn't start out that way, but he did end up that way. I will give credit where it's due. He did end up that way, and a lot of libertarians kind of looked at him as being a good governor for having made that quick turnaround. That's an entirely different story. But when it comes to the presidential nominations, the candidacy, I don't think that he had much support from libertarians. But a lot of libertarians were jumping and getting kind of excited about RFK and Vivek. And I think partly is because they were talking about things that the other duopoly candidates were not talking about. However, keep this in mind, libertarians. Statistically, for all the ones out there that care about math and numbers, statistically, one of two things: that candidate doesn't win, the anti-establishment candidate doesn't win, or the candidate that sounds like they're anti-establishment does win and flips and becomes more establishment after they get elected. Statistically, that is the case. By far, if you look at Congress, because a lot of people give me a hard time and they're like, well, you're just partisan to the Libertarian Party. Yes, I am. And they say, well, what if it was Ron Paul running? Okay, well, Ron Paul's not running first and foremost. So it's kind of an absurd argument to make. But more importantly, the reason that people support Ron Paul is not because he said what they wanted to hear. It's because he well, partly because of that. He said what they wanted to hear, right? Like there's videos going back where he would stand before a crowd and he would tell them, he would be like, look, you should be able to do all the drugs you want to do. That's none of the government's business. And people would boo him, the crowd would boo and whatnot. And he stood firm on his principles. But then when he got elected, with the exception of maybe a handful of votes, he was pretty consistent in voting in a way that libertarians would expect. So he turned out to be a good person in office. Other people, Thomas Massey, same situation. Thomas Massey is good because he consistently votes in a way that libertarians can appreciate. Now, he did come out and support DeSantis, and I was a little kind of like bummed out about that. Not terribly, because I wasn't supporting any Republicans anyway, but I was a little bummed out because I do like Thomas Massey, and I was like, dude, seriously, DeSantis, like that's the person. Okay. Um, but again, once you remove the handful of people that have turned out to be pretty decent. And when I say decent, here's what I mean. If we had a Congress full of Thomas Masseys and Ron Pauls, you can even throw Rand Paul in there. He's sometimes okay. Like, he has his moments. If we had a Congress full of those kind of people, the country would be vastly better than it is now. We would be vastly more free, crazily more free. And you know what? I bet you I bet you people would be more informed about the bills that they're passing, right? So, hands down, yes, if Congress was full of those kind of men, it would be way better country. But it's not. It's full of people that vote for the interest of anything other than the American people. That's what it's full of. That's what we tend to get. That's who the people. So to me, when people come and say, "Well, man, aren't you going to support RFK, or don't you want to support Vivek, or don't they sound great?" In some ways, yes, they did sound great. However, they were the anti-establishment candidates, and so therefore they were unlikely to win. And so I'm going to stick with the libertarian candidates, because if I'm going to support somebody that's unlikely to win, then I want to support somebody that I can get behind in as many ways as possible, because the libertarian candidates, any one of them, I can get behind them for far more reasons than I could get behind somebody like Vivek or RFK Jr. or even DeSantis. Definitely DeSantis. DeSantis is like I know his name's on the screen here, folks, and that's just because all three of them, were, I was talking about something different, so now I'm kind of on a little bit of a different tangent. So bear with me, but I could support any of the libertarian candidates for far more reasons than I could anybody running in the Republican Party or anybody running the for the Democratic Party. So that's why I'm sticking with the Libertarian Party. So let me tell you something here, because a lot of people, like, there were big personalities. I'm not going to name her name, but I'm sure you can figure out who we're talking about, who made who was like, I've got this Twitter space and I'm inviting RFK and Vivek and this person and that person. And a lot of us were like, and she said, I had the biggest audience of libertarians, and then didn't invite a single libertarian initially. And then when pressed about it, came out and said, well, the libertarians don't have any chance to win. Okay, well, guess what? None of the people that you platformed apparently have a chance to win either. So when you chose to platform people that didn't have a chance to win, you didn't even support the libertarian candidates, the candidates that, if you're libertarian, you should be able to support for far more reasons than a Republican or Democratic anti-establishment candidate. So the whole point here is stick to your guns. Support the candidates that you have far more in common with. And if you're a libertarian, it should be the libertarian candidates. Now, you might say, well, DL, I don't like the current libertarian candidates. What people are really saying, and I'm just going to be straight up honest with you, what people are really saying is that they don't like the Mises Caucus, and they're taking it out on the Libertarian Party, because we have plenty of candidates that are good, decent candidates. You could get behind one of them. You're a little bit more in the left leaning area, Chase Oliver, although technically his economic positions are totally more in the right leaning area, if you will. He's got a few social issues that some of the more right leaning libertarians are not going to be satisfied with. But if you're a more left leaning libertarian, and I hate to break it down between left and right leaning, but I mean, like, on, like social issues, if you're a little bit more of a conservative type of libertarian, personally conservative, you're probably not going to be on board with Chase Oliver. If you're a little bit more liberal, if you're a libertarian who's got a little bit more liberal feel to you, you're probably going to get more on board with the Chase Oliver type. right? But if you're not, so if Chase Oliver doesn't appeal to you, then you've got some of these other ones, right? You've got Joshua Smith, Mike Termott, Lars Mapstead. You've got all these other ones, right? Jacob Hornberger. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure that I name all of them and don't leave any out. Michael Rechtenwald, right? Like there are candidates, there are plenty of candidates. So let me compare our candidates in 2024 to candidates in 2020. Okay. I'm not going to pull anything on the screen. I'm just going to read just some things to you. So back when Florida had their convention in 2020, early on in my podcast, I did an episode. Um, it was called, what did I try to remember the name of the convention? Yeah, 2020 LPF convention afterthoughts. And so I discussed some thoughts related to the Libertarian Party of Florida's convention, where we had a whole bunch of candidates that were running for office. We had candidates that were running for the presidential nominee, and then we also had candidates that were running for the LNC chair. We're not going to talk about the LNC chair. Let's just talk about the candidates that we had then. We had Jacob Hornberger, who's again running. Now, what I did, let me back up a little bit. What I did, and I'm not going to explain, I'm not going to go into depth in it, but what I did was I tried to do something unique. I said, I'm going to give every single one of the presidential candidates one word, and then I'm going to tell you why I gave them that word, right? And so I'm going to describe them with a word. So Jacob Hornberger, I said dignified. We had some issues later on after that, but dignified. Okay. John Mons, remember him? Diplomatic. I think that word I still pretty confident on that one. Vermin Supreme, vaudevillian. That's what I said about it. We literally had a vaudeville candidate running around with the boot on his head. Not a single one of our candidates right now is running around with the boot on their head talking about free ponies and toothbrushes. Okay. That they show up to events, they're wearing a suit and a tie. They're telling you about their positions, right? Now, you might not like some of them for this or that reason. I've heard people say, like, oh, Michael Rechtenwald, he's too boring, or oh, Chase Oliver, he's too left-leaning, whatever. We got multiple candidates. Choose one. Continuing on. Adam Kokesh, vivacious. That was the guy that his campaign was, as soon as I get elected into office, I'm going to sign an executive order shutting down the entire federal government. Now, does that sound like somebody that's going to win over the general population? Not at all. Not at all. The anarchists may have loved him, right? But not at all. But our candidates that we have this year that are running right now, they're out there talking about real ideas that the general public can get behind. All right, let's finish up with this. Let's see. Dan Berman. I said he was lucid. He had a yellow hat. Now, I criticized Dan. I like Dan. I think Dan is very articulate and he explains liberty very well. My big beef with him was that he wore that silly yellow hat, you know, and it just like it stands out and it's great for a nice little gimmick for a little bit. But at the end of the day, I just wasn't feeling it. Like that was my beef. That was my one beef with him. Let's see. Joe Jorgensen. I said advocative, right? Basically, an advocate. And then let's see, is that it? Oh, Mark Whitney, megalomaniac. I stand by that one. That dude was crazy. Arvin Vora. I said piquant, which means to engage provocatively. He did engage a lot. But this was the guy, like he raised a roof with all the libertarians multiple times as the vice chair of the party, right? And he said some pretty provocative things. So I think that the candidates that we have running in 2024 are far better than the candidates that we had running in 2020. I believe we have leveled up in our candidates, all of them. I'm happy with all of them. Now I have my preference, and I'm not going to tell you who it is, but we have better candidates in 2024 than we did in 2022. There is no excuse for any libertarian to say who was who was active in the party in 2020 and supporting a candidate to turn around this year and say, "Oh, there's no libertarian candidates that I can support. So therefore, I've got to support Trump or whoever." The only reason you're saying that is because you don't like the Mises Caucus. You don't like the leadership, so you're going to take it out on the party and the candidates. And that's offensive. And you need to get your ass, head out your ass. Seriously, I'm not joking. because we have good candidates. They're working hard. These candidates came out to an affiliate, a local affiliate event, our event. That's how hard they're working. They didn't have to. They could have said, man, campaign dollars are tight. I got to save my money for state conventions. But no, they didn't. We had like 5 of them come out. 5, right? Lars Mapstead came out, Chase Oliver came out, Mike Tremont came out, Michael Rechtenwald came out, Joshua Smith came out. If we had a little trouble getting a hold of Jacob Hornberger, he might have come out if we could have gotten a hold of him, right? But these 5 candidates, they came out to a local county affiliate for a presidential event. They're hustling. They're doing the work. And they got up there, they gave their answers. They all were dressed appropriate. They, were respectable. You may not like some of them for one reason or another specifically, and that's cool, but there's one there you can find. I'm not buying the argument that there isn't a libertarian candidate for you. So if you're a libertarian candidate, again, get your head out your ass. All right, folks. A little bit punchy this morning. I had my Wheaties. The old people might remember that. Younger people, if you're watching, you'll be like, what is he talking about? Wheaties. I don't even understand. Wheaties? Ye smoke, but no. Anyway, that's my show today. Let's see what we've got for some comments in here. Let's take a look here real quick. So let's, before we close the show out here, let's see what we've got. Let's see. I don't know. It looks like that libertarian lady may be supporting Chase Oliver. She says Chase Oliver 2024. Let's see here. Libertarians will be the loud voice to keep the libertarian president in check. We will be the ones screaming louder if they veer from their principles. 100%. Our affiliate made a comment the other day, said like, look, if you want accountability, you should vote for a libertarian candidate, because if you think libertarians are tough on Republicans and Democrats, man, wait till you see how tough we are on our own. We are just, we'll run them through the coals and then stomp on them, throw them off a cliff, pick them up, and then run them over with the biggest truck that we can find. Like seriously, we're no joke on our own candidates. We hold them accountable. So Americans out there, if you're like, you've thought about like, maybe I could support a libertarian candidate, but I'm just not sure. Like, you know what? Support support at least the local ones, but definitely try to support the presidential ones. And whoever we can get elected, I assure you, we will hold them accountable. We will make sure that they do not lose sight of what they told you they would do. All right. Anyway, let's close this out for the morning. Thank you again for watching. I hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me weekdays, 7 a.m. Eastern time, for an informed discussion on politics and culture. And then again, Sundays at 7 p.m. with my co-host, Susan Hogarth, where we discuss LP happenings. We look across the vast tyranny of this United States, and we bring to you what is happening in the Libertarian Party. We tell you about events that are upcoming so that you can be inspired to either go to them if they're in your area, or say, you know what, that's a great idea. I want to implement that too in my hometown. So that's what we do every Sunday night. Make sure that you are subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer, my Rumble channel. You can go to youtube.libertydad.com or rumble.libertydad.com. Make sure, even if you're watching the show later, that you throw a comment in there and let me know how I'm doing. I do read them. Lastly, I want you to remember, if you are a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.